They wore crowns they bought online. They dined like monarchs, with stolen money. And for a terrifyingly long time, people believed them. This isn't about royalty. It's about regular people. Scammers, opportunists, narcissists, who faked their way into royal circles. They created fake titles. They invented entire countries. They forged bloodlines, adopted fake accents, and scammed their way into castles, galas, and even royal family dinners. And somehow, it worked. If you've ever wondered how far someone can get with confidence, designer knockoffs, and a fabricated family tree, this video will leave you horrified and slightly impressed. So if you love real-life stories that sound like Netflix scripts, subscribe right now. Hit that like button and tell us in the comments. Would you rather be born royal or fake it like a pro and stay until the very end? Because the final scammer didn't just lie about being a prince. He got caught because of a ham sandwich. Case 1. Alexander Wood, the fake duke. He didn't have a crown. He didn't have land. He didn't even have a real title. But for a few glorious months, Alexander Wood lived like British nobility, all thanks to one lie, a tailored suit. And the audacity of a man who believed Google was enough to fake a lineage. Alexander wasn't some misunderstood aristocrat. He was, by every measurable standard, a con artist. But not your average swindler. He didn't want to rob banks or run Ponzi schemes. No. His dream was far more refined. He wanted free room service, preferably with a silver dome on top. His plan claimed to be the 12th Duke of Marlborough, a real, existing member of the British aristocracy, and waltz into the highest echelons of society like he owned every chandelier in sight. And, for a while, he did. Between 2014 and 2015, Alexander used his fake identity to check into a series of elite London hotels, including the Ritz, Claridge's, and the Connaught. The scam began with a phone call, calm, aristocratic, impeccably timed, in which he'd announce his arrival with the subtle arrogance of someone used to butlers handling his toiletries. Then came the entrance. He'd glide into the lobby, wearing a crisp navy suit, designer cufflinks, and an expression so bored it practically yawned. Staff would leap into action. "Your Grace, welcome!" A bellhop would take his one carry-on, which, in hindsight, looked suspiciously like it came from a charity shop, and escort him to a suite far beyond the financial reach of someone who lived in a modest Essex flat. To complete the illusion, he crafted elaborate stories about his properties in Oxfordshire, spoke of upcoming meetings with foreign dignitaries, and even hinted at philanthropic projects involving endangered birds and historic fountains. He wasn't just royalty, he was royalty with a purpose. And let's be honest, the man committed. He wore bespoke suits, affected a subtle Oxford accent, and perfected the kind of aloof stare that says, "I once rode a horse through a ballroom, and I'll do it again." But even the finest performance begins to crack. Staff started noticing little things. The vague details, the vanishing acts, the unpaid bills piling up like unopened invitations to state dinners. Promised wire transfers from the estate never arrived. Eventually, someone did what no one had dared to do. They Googled him. It didn't take much. The real Duke of Marlborough was alive, wealthy, and definitely not bumming around Mayfair, pretending to be short on cash because of an overseas transfer delay. Police tracked Alexander to his actual residence, a modest 2-bedroom home in Essex, with neighbors who said things like, "Oh, he told us he had a family castle. We just thought he was eccentric." When arrested, Alexander didn't go quietly. He reportedly looked at the officers and asked, "Do you even know how to curtsy properly?" Which, for a man being dragged out of a fraud fantasy, is the kind of energy you almost have to respect. He was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for fraud and obtaining services by deception. But here's the thing. He didn't steal money in the traditional sense. He stole status. He hijacked reverence. He manipulated the centuries-old instinct to treat anyone with a noble title as someone inherently trustworthy. And he used that reflex to sleep on a 1,000 thread count sheets. In the end, Alexander Wood wasn't dangerous. He was embarrassing. A reminder that in the right suit, with the right story, and just enough nerve, anyone can play royalty at least until the minibar runs out and the front desk starts asking questions. Case 2. Marcus Hensel. The paper prince with a legal crown, Marcus Hensel, wasn't born into nobility. He didn't marry into it. He didn't inherit it, win it, or even Photoshop it. He filed for it. And technically, it worked. At 42 years old, this former German music teacher executed one of the strangest and most legally baffling royal transformations in recent memory. His method? Being adopted by a real-life princess. The woman in question was Princess Gertrude of the House of Hohenzollern, a lesser-known but legitimate member of one of Germany's most historically significant noble families. She legally adopted Marcus as her adult son, a move that, through the sheer magic of outdated European nobility laws, granted him the right to style himself as His Serene Highness Dr. Donatus, Prince of Hohenzollern. Yes, that was now his full legal name. No. The rest of the family was not amused. Almost immediately, Marcus began appearing in public as if he had stepped out of a 19th century oil painting. Silk-lined suits, royal sashes, medals he definitely didn't earn. The man understood the assignment. He attended diplomatic functions, waltzed into private banquets, and posed for selfies with unsuspecting aristocrats and dignitaries. He even began giving short speeches, thanking hosts on behalf of the family, and referencing fictitious royal engagements. At one charity gala, he reportedly offered to extend greetings from the crown, though no one knew which crown he was referring to. The peak of his social climb. A widely circulated photo showing Marcus standing just feet away from King Charles during a formal event. The image went viral, mostly because no one had any idea who he was. The backlash from the actual Hohenzollerns was swift and brutal. They released a public statement branding Marcus as an opportunist and a fraud. They emphasized repeatedly that he had no blood ties to the family and no authorization to represent them in any capacity. But legally, their hands were tied. Despite the outcry, Marcus's name began appearing on guest lists, noble directories, and even society magazines. His social media became a curated fantasy of castle balconies, antique libraries, and gloved handshakes. In captions, he'd correct anyone who failed to use the full Your Serene Highness title. According to multiple reports, Marcus tried using his noble identity to secure VIP treatment at luxury hotels, request business loans, and establish credibility for investment ventures. He once suggested a royal partnership with a Swiss bank. No one knew what that meant, and that was the point. And here's the twist. He wasn't breaking any laws. He wasn't impersonating anyone. He was simply leaning very, very hard into a loophole that let him live like royalty without a single drop of blue blood. His existence posed an uncomfortable question. If royalty is supposed to be about legacy and lineage, what does it mean when all it takes is a notary and a signature? To this day, Marcus Hensel remains a legally adopted member of the House of Hohenzollern. The title is his. The discomfort is everyone else's. He didn't forge a name. He didn't create a fake country. But he did something arguably more absurd. He turned one of Europe's most ancient titles into a customer loyalty card. And for a while, it scanned just fine. Case 3. Anna Sorokin, the heiress who made Manhattan. Boshi didn't come from money. She didn't speak with an old money drawl, but she walked through New York's elite like she had a private jet on standby and a 6-figure trust fund waiting. To mature, Anna Sorokin, better known by her alias Anna Delvey, was the Russian-born con artist who posed as a German heiress and turned Manhattan's high society into her personal playground. And sometimes her personal piggy bank. Her scam wasn't built on one grand deception. It was a collage of curated illusions. She claimed to be the daughter of a wealthy diplomat, then a steel magnate, then a financier with family wealth, too complicated to explain. The brilliance wasn't in the lie. It was in how she wore it. Effortlessly. Expensively. From 2016 to 2017, Anna checked into Manhattan's most luxurious hotels, the Mercer, 11 Howard, the W, without leaving a credit card on file. She claimed her financial manager in Zurich would handle it. She dined at Cipriani, hosted parties at Soho House, and dropped names so casually that no one dared to Google them. She was often seen in Celine sunglasses and designer dresses, staring down hostesses and concierges like they were interns in her fictional empire. Her Instagram, a highlight reel of rooftop views, expensive handbags, and cryptic captions like, "Too rich to care." She promised investors a grand project, the Anna Delvey Foundation, a multi-million-dollar private art club in a Manhattan landmark. She had floor plans, architects, and a whole pitch deck. The only thing she didn't have was money. But that didn't stop her. She submitted doctored bank statements to secure a $22 million loan from a prominent financial institution. She almost got it too. To friends, she was equally bold. She invited them on lavish trips to Morocco, Ibiza, the Hamptons. And when it came time to pay, she'd feign outrage. "My wire didn't clear yet," she'd scoff. "Just put it on your card. I'll reimburse you tomorrow." They believed her. One friend ended up $62,000 in debt. Another had to fight her charges in civil court. The illusion started to crumble when hotel managers began demanding payment. Anna stalled, dodged, and eventually just disappeared. When the police caught up with her in 2018, she was hiding out in a luxury rehab center, claiming to be working on a business memoir. Her trial became a media circus. Not because of the charges, but because of the fashion she refused to wear. Her prison uniform in court, demanding designer outfits each day. She threw tantrums over unapproved accessories and delayed proceedings over footwear. She was sentenced to 4 to 12 years for theft and grand larceny. Served less than 4. And, within months of release, she had sold the rights to her life story to Netflix for over $300,000. When asked in an interview if she regretted it, she said, "I'd do it all again. I just wouldn't get caught." To those who saw her from across a room, Anna looked exactly like the kind of person you should know. She had the posture of someone used to private chauffeurs, and the audacity of someone who believed the universe owed her a penthouse. One hotel concierge later described her as the most entitled guest we've ever had, and also the most broke. Another staff member said she gave off the aura of someone who could ruin your career with a Yelp review. The media devoured the story. Not because she stole millions, but because she exposed something deeper. How much New York's elite cared about appearances over substance. How easy it was to fake legitimacy with enough designer clothing and the right tone of disdain. Even after prison, she managed to stay relevant. She launched an art collection from ICE detention. She held interviews about starting her own brand. For someone who lied her way to the top, she somehow turned the fallout into a second act, and perhaps that was her most successful con of all. Convincing the world that being interesting was more valuable than being honest. Case 4. Gregor McGregor. The man who invented a country. He didn't forge documents. He didn't impersonate someone else. He just made up a nation and convinced people to move there. Gregor McGregor was a Scottish soldier, adventurer, and con artist who in the early 19th century pulled off one of the most outrageous scams in colonial history. He invented a country called Poyais. According to McGregor, Poyais was a hidden jewel of Central America. Rich in gold, with crystal-clear rivers, fertile soil, European-style buildings, an organized government, and a monarchy just waiting to shake hands with the British Empire. The capital? St. Joseph. The currency? The Poyais dollar. The future? Glorious. He called himself the Cazique of Poyais, claimed royal authority, and presented himself in London society as a noble statesman. To make it convincing, he printed government bonds, land certificates, passports, military commissions, and even a 355-page guidebook that described everything from the national anthem to the Poyais legal system. There were even uniforms for the Poyaisian army, detailed maps of a coastline that didn't exist, and a national flag sewn by hand. McGregor staged it all with the flair of a man who didn't just want to fake royalty, he wanted to fake an empire. The country didn't exist. Not partially, not in theory, not even on the map. But that didn't stop the dream from selling. In 1822, McGregor opened an office in London and began selling over 500,000 acres of land in Poyais to enthusiastic investors. He offered loans, shares in future gold exports, and exclusive settlement rights. His charisma was relentless. He even arranged for transport ships, because what's a good con without a tragic ending? Nearly 250 people boarded ships bound for Heirs, carrying tools, furniture, family heirlooms, and printed deeds to land they believed they owned. They expected to arrive at a flourishing colony. What they found was jungle. Dense, untouched jungle. No buildings, no port, no farms, no St. Joseph. Just swampland, tropical disease, and the sound of nothing, which quickly turned to the sound of people crying, coughing, and realizing they'd been abandoned. Disease spread rapidly. Starvation followed. By the time rescue ships arrived, months later, over half the colonists had died. The survivors were skeletal, sunburned, and too weak to stand. Some still clutched their fake passports. Back in Britain, the scandal exploded. Angry families demanded justice. The press called it one of the most shameful frauds in history. Parliament debated it, but MacGregor, he fled the country and tried to run the same scam in France. He was arrested there, briefly imprisoned, but acquitted. And in one of history's most baffling outcomes, he returned to Venezuela years later, where he was welcomed as a hero, awarded a military pension, and buried with full honors after his death. In London, the illusion was nearly, flawless. MacGregor held lavish receptions in rented halls, wore regal military uniforms stitched by expert tailors, and hosted investors over wine and imported cigars. He spoke of alliances with fictional leaders, and handed out titles of nobility to wealthies. Donors who didn't want land, they just wanted legacy. The press wrote favorably. Clerks approved documents. Even skeptics hesitated to question him, because who argues with a man who arrives in a carry? But once the truth surfaced, trust shattered. Newspapers published satirical sketches mocking His Highness of Nowhere. Parliament debated. Colonial oversight. And families who had lost everything, including loved ones, realized they had been tricked by a flag, a story, and a very confident man with no conscience. Gregor MacGregor never served a day for the lives he destroyed. He didn't just con people out of money. He sold them hope, geography, and belonging. And when they showed up for it, there was nothing. He didn't just invent a country. He invented a cautionary tale. And for one surreal moment, the map bowed to his imagination. Case 5. Anthony Gignac. The Prince of Ham and Fraud. He wore Rolexes, flew private, and stayed in penthouse suites. He dined at Nobu, drove Ferraris, and collected luxury handbags. He also ordered pork at a high-end restaurant. And that, oddly enough, was his downfall. Anthony Gignac spent decades posing as Prince Khalid bin Al Saud, a fictitious member of the real Saudi royal family. Born in Colombia and adopted by an American family, he reinvented himself as Gulf royalty and conned people out of millions in the process. His scam began in the 1980s and evolved over time. He studied the habits, accents, and mannerisms of Saudi elites. He dressed the part, spoke with fabricated gravitas, and surrounded himself with fake bodyguards. He drove cars with diplomatic plates and carried forged documents identifying him as a Saudi dignitary. In public, he insisted on being addressed as Your Highness. He demanded security escorts, handwritten welcome letters, and even gold-trimmed menus. His luggage bore Saudi royal crests. He tipped in absurd amounts, when he paid at all. Over the years, he scammed luxury retailers, high-end hotels, private banks, and wealthy individuals. At one point, he convinced a luxury car dealership to deliver 2 Bentleys before payment. Another time, he checked into a $35,000 per night suite under royal credentials and walked out without settling the bill. But Gignac's most ambitious scam came in 2017, when he targeted a billionaire real estate developer in Florida. Disguised as Prince Khalid, he expressed interest in purchasing a massive luxury hotel in Miami, a deal that could have been worth over $400 million. The tycoon, dazzled by the apparent royalty, gave Gignac everything he asked for. Exclusive dinners, private jets, chauffeurs, and unrestricted access to financial data about the hotel. Every meeting was handled delicately. After all, who wanted to offend a Saudi prince? Everything was going smoothly Until one dinner changed everything. A private meal with executives, Gignac ordered prosciutto and lobster. One of the attendees, a practicing Muslim himself, immediately noticed, pork and shellfish are strictly prohibited in Islam, and a devout Saudi prince would never, under any circumstance, eat either. That one detail unraveled the entire illusion. The tycoon hired private investigators, who quickly discovered that Prince Khalid had a long history of fraud, dozens of aliases, and zero connection to any royal bloodline. The FBI soon got involved. When agents raided Gignac's Miami apartment, they found a surreal scene. Forged passports, fake diplomatic badges, racks of designer clothes, and unpaid bills scattered across the floor. He still claimed diplomatic immunity. They still put him in handcuffs. The FBI described Gignac as one of the most persistent con artists they had ever encountered, someone who maintained his royal persona for over 30 years. When interrogated, he insisted on being treated with respect, claiming diplomatic status even as the evidence piled up around him. Victims ranged from high-level executives to hotel managers and luxury brands, all of whom admitted they wanted to believe him. One said, "He didn't seem like a fraud. He seemed like someone who expected the world to serve him. The media had a field day. Headlines branded him the pork-eating prince and Your Highness of Hustle." Editorials debated how a man with no real wealth had managed to unlock doors reserved for billionaires and royalty. The scandal wasn't just about money, it was about the fantasy he exploited. He understood something few scammers do, that pretending to be rich can open more doors than actually being rich. In the end, he wasn't taken down by complex investigations or sting operations. He was undone by a dinner order. Because while Gignac could fake papers, titles, and power, he couldn't fake what he was having for dinner. In a world obsessed with status, these 5 impostors didn't need crowns, empires, or birthrights. They needed confidence, costumes, and just enough gullibility in the room to let the illusion breathe. They didn't hack systems. They hacked expectations. They sold stories that people wanted to believe. And for a terrifyingly long time, it worked. From fake heirs to imaginary nations, they remind us of one uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, looking the part is more powerful than being it. And if this video made you raise an eyebrow, laugh nervously, or question how many legit titles you've seen online, you're exactly the kind of viewer we love. So don't forget to subscribe for more twisted tales from the real world. Hit that like button if you enjoy frauds wrapped in luxury, and drop a comment telling us which of these scammers impressed or disturbed you the most. And remember, next time someone says they're royalty, check the dinner order.